G'day guys, and welcome back to an episode of our Kart Class Podcast. It's been a little while since we've last recorded one, so today's episode is going to be all about kart setup basics that every parent should understand. Now, it's sometimes a bit of a black hole when it comes to kart setup. What should I change? When should I adjust it? Who do I listen to? But we want to try and break things down for a lot of the parents, so it's a lot easier next time I go to the racetrack. Now, some of the basic changes that we alter from a race weekend are the front and rear track width. And now when we're adjusting these sorts of things, we're talking like one small spacer at a time. So if we're running, just say on a cadet, 30 mil of spaces, we might go to 25. But we're not going from 30 to 10 mil of spaces. We're not changing sort of 20 mil per side. They're only in very small increments. Same as on a senior kart, you're going from that 10 mil spacer to either 15 or to 5. Now, if I'm trying to help understeer, I'm actually trying to widen the front end. So basically what happens is if I've got, again, 10 mil of spaces in my senior kart and the kart's pushing on the way into the corner, so I'm turning into the corner and the kart wants to sort of drive me forward, I'm going to increase the front space by about 5 mil. So just one little spacer per side. That should help the initial turn in into a corner. So again, if you're just translating that to a cadet kart as well, if you're going from 25 mil of spaces, you're going to sort of that 30 mil. Now what's going to happen is once we start getting much wider or out of that window on the front track, you can keep going wider, but then all of a sudden we're getting towards a wet front end settings where we're sort of maxing at the front. And that's sort of masking an overlying issue where there's other things that need to be adjusted to help that front end steer. Now that could be the caster, that could be the camber, it could be the lead ballast placement on the seat or, moving that further forward. So what I'm trying to get at is keeping yourself in that setup window and not going too far out of it, because then it's very hard to get yourself back into the setup that you need to be sort of in. Same as the rear track width. Now for our cadet karts, we're talking sort of 2 to 3 mil increments when we're adjusting. And for our senior karts, it's basically 2.5 to 5 mil increments. So again, if you're 1390 in the rear track and you want to just get the kart to release out of the corners a bit more, you might go to 1395. If the kart's slipping and sliding around in the cold mornings, you might just go into 1385. So it's that 2.5 mil of spaces per side should be enough. When we're looking at camber, what's going to happen is that if we start to use too much negative camber, you can't really notice it on a brand new tyre too much, but after they do maybe say 40 or 50 laps, you're going to start to see the inside dots starting to wear out a lot faster than the outside dots. Now, for parents that are going to be racing on new tyres frequently, it's not a massive concern, because even if in practice your tyres are starting to wear down, when you go to the next race event, you're going to put a new set of tyres on and it should mask a lot of those issues up anyway. But for some parents that are going to try and do 200 laps on a set of tyres, even for just practicing purposes, then what you might do is you might start with a couple of mil degrees of negative per side, and maybe after that 30 laps you might just take it back to 1 mil of negative per side, and then maybe after another 50 or 60 laps, get to that 100 lap stage, you might just go to 0 camber. Now it might not help the overall lap time out, but it might give you a little bit more tyre longevity. So again, if you just keep driving around 2 mil or 3 mil of negative per side, it gets that 100 lap mark and all of a sudden your front tyres are completely worn out and you're not really achieving much anyway, because the front tyres are completely screwed and now the imbalance between the front and rear is gone, and all of a sudden your times are actually pretty average also as well. So just have a think about your budget, the practice days you're going to be trying to do. If you are putting set of tyres on all the time, it doesn't really matter as such, but you might need to take away some of that negative camber from the brand new tyres as you move forward to the tyres starting to wear down a little bit. When it comes to the caster, we might use a couple of mil extra caster. So we're just going to talk about standard caster here. So we've got standard caster as a starting point. If the kart's a little bit slippery or the front doesn't have much bite into the corners, it's sort of a little bit lazy, it doesn't quite turn in too well, we might just give it a couple of mil extra, so tilting the kingpin towards the rear of the chassis. And then what we're trying to do is, as the grip in the track gets better or the tyres are brand new or the track's hot, we start to decrease that caster. So we start to tilt that kingpin back to a neutral position. Don't tend to go above the neutral position. So previously on some of the senior karts tyres, we used to take a lot of the caster out on brand new tyres because they had so much front bite that we didn't need any caster at all, and then we'd increase it by 1 mil probably per session. But nowadays we sort of start at that neutral, and then as the tyres wear down or it gets a little bit slippery in the mornings or want the tyres to switch on a little bit sooner, we might just increase the front caster by about 1 to 2 mil. If you're looking to adjust the ride heights, a lot of the cadet karts these days, even typically across different brands of karts, seem to run a low front ride height. So that's where there's no spaces on top of the stub, and then there's going to be, depending on which brand of kart, all the spaces towards the bottom end of the stub. So how that works is you're shifting the spaces. That's going to actually lift up the stub axle, but in turn it actually lowers the front of the chassis. So what you're trying to do is give it more front bite and release the rear end by having the weight transfer towards the front over the back. Now, from a cadet point of view, we seem to just run a set and forget for dry conditions. Low front helps the rear end release. When it comes to the wet conditions, we might put that back to a central position. Again, we're trying to keep the kart nice and stable. We're looking for actually rear traction in the wet rather than rear release compared to the dry with the warmer conditions and the dry circuits and the grippy tyres. We're trying to actually get that rear traction and less wheel spin. So you can adjust the rear ride height depending on whether it's a dry session or it's a wet session. I think that we've been doing recently for a lot of the drivers that I've just been coaching for the first time is literally just shifting around their lead ballast. Now, whether that is they've got 6 or 7 kilos on the rear of the cart, on the back of the seat, we're trying to shift that to underneath the crutch on the left hand side of the seat, and even some towards the front of the frame. Again, just moving it around to try and sort of offset where a lot of that weight is on the go-kart. Well, obviously when you've got the driver seated in the cart, most of it's towards the rear axle, and then you've got your engine on the right hand side. So we're just trying to counterbalance that by putting some on the left hand side and some underneath the crutch area, and that's just trying to again help the rear release. Now for the wet conditions, as we just said before about looking for that rear traction, we might move some of that lead ballast from underneath the crutch or the front of the cart to the back of the seat. And all that's trying to do is give it a little bit less front, but more rear end stability and traction overall as well. So it's not something we change a lot of, but depending on what the driver feels, that's when we start to maneuver some of that lead ballast around. So they're just some kart setup basics that hopefully parents can understand a little bit more rather than going in massive increments and then sort of losing their way or listening to every Tom, Dick and Harry and again having different ideas and really getting lost. From a race team point of view, a lot of our drivers, even at national level, did not change the axle once last year. So from a cadet point of view, we ran a 4-dot axle from an AKC level race to a GPS to a club race. We just altered the camber and the caster, the front track width and a little bit in the rear track width. But that was basically it. Even our junior drivers that went on to be on the podium at some AKC races didn't change the rear axle either. It was more just about moving lead around, again, changing the ride heights, changing the front and rear track width and the camber and caster, depending on the circuit layout and the track surface. So you can change axles to go a little bit faster or potentially a little bit slower, but just think it's not the be all end all. If you are more than probably 0.5 to 0.8 off the pace, most likely it's going to be a lot more in your driving rather than the 5 mil space in the front end or the 1 or 2 mil of caster. That's going to mask a lot of the things that potentially what you're looking for is actually just, are they carrying enough corner speed? Are they braking late enough? Or are they braking too late? They're actually in a pretty average exit out of the corners. So yeah, they're just some basics on hopefully helping you guys out at the kart track next time you're on the circuit. We do have a kart setup program that's probably our best seller through Kart Class because obviously it does help parents with what setup adjustments do and when to make them. So it doesn't say for a parallel and cadet kart in this condition on this track, use this setup. It basically says if you drop the rear ride height or drop the front ride height, this is what it will do and this is when you look to do it. This is when I'd be looking to change the seat stiffness or the seat position or the axles, or how much camber or casts to run in certain conditions. So it's just a little bit of a black book for some parents that are a little bit stuck when they get to the racetrack. So not always needed, but hopefully there's something there if you are stuck. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of our Kart Class podcast. We'll try and ramp up a bit more this year with trying to give you guys some generic information. And if you're stuck, just send a question to info@kartclass.com, because I'm sure there's other parents out there that are possibly stuck with the same question. So I can just try and answer on a podcast to help a few more people out in the one hit. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll speak to you guys next time.